I will go out on a limb and say that because it is really, its mechanism is subtle. It takes time to show up. And this is part of why the industry has been able to conceal its toxicity all these years. And it is by far the most pervasive herbicide in our environment. It's all over our food supply. It's in our water. It's in our air. We can't avoid it in this country. So it's a very demoralizing situation that we are in. And I feel there has to be tremendous pressure on the government to really orchestrate a major overhaul in the way we do agriculture. We really have to get back to organic agriculture. Small family farms is probably the right solution.
Welcome to Long COVID Foundation podcast. This is the channel where we share educational information on long COVID to help you understand your symptoms better. In just a moment, we will have an interview with Dr. Stephanie Seneff and Mr. Joachim Gerlach. This will be a unique opportunity to learn on the uniquely toxic nature of glyphosate, how glyphosate disturbs the microbiome, leading to the gut dysbiosis, autoimmunity, neurodegeneration, and more. So it's my pleasure to welcome Dr. Stephanie Seneff, author of The Toxic Legacy of Glyphosate, Senior Research Fellow at MIT. For over 3 decades, her research interests have always been at the intersection of biology and computation. Since 2011, she has published over 24 papers in various medical and health-related journals on topics such as modern-day diseases, example Alzheimer, autism, cardiovascular diseases, analysis and search of databases of drugs, side effects using NLP techniques, and the impact of nutritional deficiencies and environmental toxins on human health. Dr. Seneff, it's such a pleasure to have you on our channel.
To be here. Thank you for having me. And here's my book, Toxic Legacy, How the Weed Killer Glyphosate is Destroying Our Health and the Environment. That's been a decade's worth of studying to figure out this chemical, which is an amazing, very interesting toxic chemical, I think, causing devastation.
Thank you so much. Likewise, I would like to introduce Joachim Gerlach, entrepreneur and expert in research and development. Mr. Gerlach is co-founder of Medicinals biotech company that recently developed a novel nutraceutical protocol to support patients with acute and long COVID conditions. The resulting product, Medicinals 9, has successfully completed intensive preclinical and clinical trials. Mr. Gerlach is also co-founder of recently initiated Long COVID Coalition, which drives top-quality scientific research from experts globally to drive development of targeted solutions helping people suffering with long COVID. Joachim Gerlach, it's my pleasure to welcome you to our channel.
Good evening, ladies. The pleasure is on my side. Before we even start in today's conversation, I want to set some records straight because I've been working with Stephanie now for several years and I've been watching all the so-called fact checkers and other scientists, if you want to call them that way, doing some really very gnarly and nasty character assassination and doubting Stephanie's qualifications as to judge the dangerous consequences of using this weed killer or herbicide in such proportions in the daily consumption of food. And so she was criticized severely by many institutions and companies and other scientists as to the scientific value of the work of that she has provided in multiple studies on glyphosate and this herbicide. But after the verdict in the Californian trial against the company producing that, it is now crystal clear that there wouldn't be billion-dollar payments in damages to the victims of these molecules and this chemical if there were not commissions of independent experts coming to the conclusion that it does cause cancer. And so I just want to make clear that actually these people should apologize to Stephanie for criticizing her, because by doing that, she's now bringing the awareness out there to the population and to the people that this is not a harmless substance, and that so by doing that, she just tries to prevent people from being harmed by that. So that is, as an opening, it was on my heart to say that.
Thank you so much for your support. It means so much to me.
We are very keen to understand what is behind the glyphosate, and you're an expert in this area. And my first question would be, what are the toxic mechanisms there? What it causes long term?
That is a huge question, because if you read my book, you will see that what I think is happening is that it is getting into proteins by mistake in place of the coding amino acid glycine. I think that hits at the heart of why glyphosate is such an unusual chemical, causing so many diseases, the rise in so many diseases we see over time in countries as they adopt a glyphosate-based food system. It's just incredible. And you look at the United States and the health conditions here today, we are in a mess right now with the number of people who have obesity and diabetes and heart disease and high blood pressure and Alzheimer's and autism. I mean, the list just goes on and on, all kinds of gut problems. We are exposed to many, many toxic chemicals. I'm not saying I can put all of those on the shoulders of glyphosate, but I think glyphosate is the key, most consequential chemical that we are exposed to. I will go out on a limb and say that, because it is really, its mechanism is subtle. It takes time to show up. And this is part of why the industry has been able to conceal its toxicity all these years. And it is by far the most pervasive herbicide in our environment. It's all over our food supply. It's in our water. It's in our air. We can't avoid it in this country. So it's a very demoralizing situation that we are in. And I feel there has to be tremendous pressure on the government to really orchestrate a major overhaul in the way we do agriculture. We really have to get back to organic agriculture. Small family farms is probably the right solution. We need to go back, or otherwise our population is going to be so sick that nobody's going to be able to do anything other than take care of their loved ones who are sick. That's just going to be a full-time job for everybody. That's the way we're headed, in my opinion. It's very demoralizing. So yes, I think that glyphosate clearly disrupts the gut microbiome, and that is central to its where the disease process starts. And that makes a lot of sense, even if you don't say that it substitutes for glycine, because that's still a controversial topic. It does disrupt the shikimate pathway, which is a very important biological pathway that exists in all plants and in most of the microbes. And we have many, many microbes in our gut that are hit hard by glyphosate. It's been shown experimentally, in fact, that the beneficial bacteria, bifidobacteria and lactobacillus, that are so important in the infant gut to get everything started correctly, they are very sensitive to glyphosate. Other species are less sensitive, and so they become more abundant, and you get an imbalance where there are these species that induce an inflammatory response. And then you get an inflammatory gut. It leads to things like Crohn's disease and colitis, the inflammatory bowel diseases. Those are going up exactly in step with the rise in glyphosate usage on core crops. And so, and then there's all kinds of disruptions also of the metabolites that the microbes produce, because the host depends on their gut microbiome for many, many things. And we've come to realize that as a consequence of glyphosate messing them up. You can't believe the number of papers. When you look at the number of papers over time in PubMed related to the gut microbiome, they have gone up tremendously over the past 20 years as people became aware how important the gut is to our health, to our general health, and in particular to our brain health. There's this gut-brain axis where there's tremendous communication between the gut microbes and the brain, the nerve system of the gut and the nerve system of the brain, lots of communication there. When your gut is not healthy, your brain becomes unhealthy as well. And so it's this shikimate pathway is a critical pathway in the microbes that allows them to make critical nutrients for the host, starting with the aromatic amino acids. And those are 3 of the essential amino acids that go into the protein code. And those are also precursors to a number of really important biologically active molecules in the host. For example, all of the neurotransmitters, dopamine, serotonin, melatonin, the skin tanning agent, melanin, those all come out of that shikimate pathway, and also the thyroid hormone and various B vitamins. So all of those things can become deficient when the glyphosate is messing up the shikimate pathway in the microbes that would normally make those nutritional, provide the base for those nutritional important molecules.
Whatever you just said is very similar to what we see in long COVID. So we just recently, during our Long COVID Coalition Second Congress, recognized that COVID is not just virus. It's behavior. It's like bacteriophage, and it damages gut quite severely. And most probably all this persisting symptoms that people have is also gut related. From your knowledge so far, what you've learned in relation to glyphosate, how these diseases progress, and what are the main sort of causes behind those diseases that glyphosate is doing to gut health?
I mean, it's basically, I think that you get this overabundance of these species that induce an inflammatory response. The immune cells come in and they release inflammatory cytokines, which then inflame the gut, and you get a leaky gut. I mean, there have been peer-reviewed studies that have shown that glyphosate causes a leaky gut. Glyphosate also disrupts the ability to metabolize proteins, and this is especially important for proteins that contain proline, the amino acid proline. It turns out proline is an interesting amino acid that's difficult to break apart from its neighbors. And so actually our gut microbes, in particular lactobacillus, they provide several enzymes that assist the host in breaking apart proteins that contain proline. And in particular, there's two proteins in particular that have a lot of proline, and that is the gluten in wheat and then casein in milk. And many, many people are suffering from casein intolerance, gluten intolerance. They're going on a gluten-free, casein-free diet. Many people, especially, for example, the autistic kids, because they can't handle those proteins. And the reason why they can't handle them, I suspect, is because the lactobacillus are being clobbered by the glyphosate, and the enzymes that would break down those proteins are not available. Those proteins the peptides end up surviving in the mid-gut. They don't get metabolized, and then they become immunogenic. There's this whole process of molecular mimicry, where the antibody is able to recognize the sequence in the gluten, but there's a similar sequence in the human protein that it misrecognizes. It kind of makes a mistake and attacks the human protein as well. And that's how you can get a lot of different autoimmune conditions, because the proteins, the antibodies to the peptides that are not being digested and are leaking out of the gut, they're causing these antibodies to develop that are then attacking human proteins. And they can attack things like the myelin sheath, and it can cause rheumatoid arthritis. There's a lot of different conditions, multiple sclerosis, rheumatoid arthritis, and autism as well. I think